Hey everyone, welcome back to the workshop. Artisan Pirate here, and in today's fun discussion style video, we are going to be talking about the materials that I personally like to use over at the scroll saw when making beautiful and creative scroll saw woodworking projects. Now, a scroll saw is capable of cutting out a plethora of different styles and varieties of materials. They are commonly associated with cutting out different species of woods, exotic woods, hardwoods, different species, sheet goods, things like that. But they can also cut out, with the proper techniques, practice, and blade selection, soft metals, acrylics, and plastics. Today's video, as I said, is the materials that I like to use over at the scroll saw, and hopefully it will help and inspire some people who might be curious about scroll saw woodworking and wanting to get into the hobby, but they do not want to spend a bunch of material on exotic or hardwoods. Some of these materials are very good to practice on if you are just getting into the hobby, and hopefully also it will inspire some seasoned, as they like to call it, seasoned scroll saw woodworking artists, and maybe inspire them to try a new material on their scroll saw out in their garage or workshop. Now, the most common material that I use out here for scroll saw woodworking projects is 1/4 inch material. We have used a lot of this material in previous scroll saw project videos. This is the material that I pick up locally at the local Lowe's Home Improvement Warehouse. It is called Revolution Ply. It comes in a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet. And what I usually do is get the person working in the lumber yard to go to the panel saw and break it down into 4 2-foot by 4-foot sections for ease of transportation. And then when I bring it out into the workshop, I continually break it down to the sizes and dimensions that these scroll saw patterns call for. Now, you can see that it does have a light shade and texture here on the face side, as I like to call it, and this is the side that I would traditionally attach the pattern to for scroll saw woodworking. And then the backer side, I'm going to turn it slowly so you can see, has a darker texture. It has kind of a red tint to it. But please be aware, if you use this material, it does have a very thin veneer on the top layer here, and it has chipped out on me occasionally. And if you get some close-ups of some of the projects I've made, you can see where it chipped out. But as long as I keep a fresh and sharp blade in the scroll saw, it'll cut through this material like butter. One other thing to keep aware of is that this is not a true 1/4 inch in thickness. So anytime I do a tabbed or slotted design, I will take a scrap piece of the same material here. I'll usually cut it off in a little triangle to where I can test fit everything, and I'll redraw all of those slots to accept the tabs with a proper snug fit for assembly purposes. So just please keep that in mind. But I've cut this out, I've stack cut it. It takes paint, stains, and clear coats exceptionally well, and it just has a variety of uses. Here is a project that I made using this exact material, so you can see what I call the raw material here, and here you see the finished design. The scroll saw work of the beautiful Union Pacific steam locomotive going over the bridge, which is a Steve Good design, as well as the backer board, are both this material here. So you can see it took the paint well, it took the stain well for the scroll saw work, and then it took the clear coat exceptionally well. Now, I know when it comes to 1/4 inch material, the word going around that the most common material to use is, of course, Baltic birch plywood, and I have used that in the past. It's just in my area where I'm at locally, it is very expensive. Even if I go out of town and I stumble upon it and find it, it's still relatively expensive, and it runs a true, very true 1/4 inch in thickness, so you don't have to go with the extra leg work of redrawing your cut lines or anything if you're going to use a tabbed or slotted design. I have used it in the past, and it comes in a variety of thicknesses. Here is a 1/2 inch piece of Baltic birch plywood. You can see it has a universal look all the way around, and it is indeed a very good material to use over at the scroll saw, and it's kind of the quote-unquote scroller's choice of material to use. It's just when I found the Revolution plywood and I wanted to try it, I found that it cut out very similarly to the Baltic birch plywood. It just takes a little bit of time working with it because you have to keep a sharp blade in your scroll saw, if that makes any sense. But by all means, if you can afford it and it is available in your area, go pick up the Baltic birch plywood and try it for yourselves. But as I said, the Revolution ply that I held up at the beginning is a very good alternative. I want to talk now about pine. You guys know I love to use pine material. It sands, shapes, cuts, and contours exceptionally well, and it also takes the paint, stains, and clear coats exceptionally well. I usually go to the local builder's center and pick up a regular 8-foot 11.5 inch wide by 3/4 inch thick piece of it for $10. That is US currency, and all the prices I'm going to be talking about in today's video is US currency. I know it'll vary and differ with the prices wherever you guys are out in the big wide world, but this is just a great material to teach with visually over here on the platform. And anytime I use pine like this in a video, I tell you guys, by all means, if you have the capability and the means, go out and get exotic or hardwoods to make the same exact project that I made out of pine out in your garage or workshop. But it is a great teacher's tool to use to teach with visually over here on the platform, or at least I hope it is when I make the creative designs. But I will continually break this board down until there's nothing left, and then I'll go get a new one. So again, that is very inexpensive to pick up, and here is a project that I made from pine shelving board. This beautiful sitting bull portrait here is almost 2 foot tall. This is a Steve Good design, and you can see how nice and crisp it cut. Now, I did not pick up this material at the Builder Center like I did with the bigger piece I just showed you. This was actually a shelf in the house, and I took the shelf down to put up something nicer, and I just took the brackets off and I cut the material off to where I could attach the pattern to it, you know, where the screws were on it holding the brackets and everything, and it came out beautifully in my opinion. And the Rust-Oleum clear gloss really brought the grains and textures out, and I love that it had this knot going through it. I was hoping that wouldn't be an issue, you know, with the knot wanting to chip or break away, but I love that it has this two-toned textured appearance, and again, this is that pine material. So really cool. And then I went a step further back in 2020 when we were kind of stuck at home with everything going on in the world. I made this beautiful Patriot clock, that is the name of it, on Steve Good's pattern catalog. I milled down a pine shelving board to the proper dimensions. I believe everything here is around 1/2 inch in thickness. I ran it through my thickness planer. I just wanted to showcase that with a little bit of time and effort, you can of course make some beautiful and creative projects out of pine material. And this one of course is stained a universal color. And when I stain materials like pine, I always like to use a light shade of Minwax wood stain to still allow the natural shades, grains, and textures of the material to shine through. And then again, the Rust-Oleum clear gloss really made everything pop. And I would really like to come back and make this project visually once again, to make it as a featured video here on the platform, maybe for a 4th of July video or something like that. But again, made 100% out of pine shelving board. The next material I want to talk about is basic construction grade plywood. And you guys know that this is a throwback material for me, because when I first started doing some more intermediate and advanced designs over at the scroll saw under my grandfather's guidance, this is the material that I was using. And again, as long as you keep a fresh and sharp blade in your scroll saw, it will cut, sand, shape exceptionally well. But also please be aware, because it's not meant for delicate scroll saw work, it can break, chip away, or you know, the layers can delaminate or something like that. So I'm always curious when I attach a pattern to construction grade plywood how it's going to come out and how it's going to react when it is over at the scroll saw. I can say the same thing about the Baltic birch plywood. This is the material I used to begin with, because my grandfather, who taught me scroll saw woodworking, knew a cabinet shop worker, and he got a lot of scrap 12-inch by 12-inch pieces, and that's what I made some of my very first designs with over at the scroll saw, the Baltic birch plywood. But then I learned of the Revolution ply that I can get over at Lowe's, and I was off to the races making beautiful designs. I discovered the Revolution ply maybe about 4 years ago when I was shopping around for 1/4 inch material. Of course, I was going to go for Baltic birch, but then I found the Revolution ply and I thought, hey, I'll give it a shot, and I've liked it ever since. But construction grade plywood is a throwback for me, because again, it's what I made some of those earlier advanced and intermediate designs with, and it brings those fond memories of my grandfather back to me, and it has just kind of a nostalgia feel for it. But I've used different thicknesses. This one here is around 3/16 inch in thickness. You can see that it has the stamp there being construction grade plywood, and I believe this one was upcycled because it has a hole in it there where a screw or nail was on, like from a shipping crate or container or something like that. But the construction grade plywood also, with the other materials I have shown you, cuts exceptionally well over at the scroll saw. This little Southwest cow skull diorama was made from 1/2 inch construction grade plywood, and you can really tell it on the back side of the shield there. But if you just kind of happen to glance at it, you know, and look at it on a wall, you would not know that this was made out of basic construction grade plywood that is more so than not readily available at most lumber yards. So really, really cool there. Another material that I like to use is basic dimensional lumber. When I first wanted to do compound cutting over at the scroll saw, some of the first compound cuts was made out of basic 2x4 offcuts or 2x6, 4x4, whatever the pattern called for is what I would mill down to use for compound cuts over at the scroll saw. Now in my area locally, I can get 2x4 pieces from either spruce, I can get them, they're out of spruce, or they are going to be pine. I'm talking about pine a lot in today's video, but that is what is available in my neck of the woods. And again, you can cut it down. I have split it before into 1/2-inch pieces and cut out projects with it, and again, it scrolls exceptionally well as long as you keep a fresh and sharp scroll saw blade in the scroll saw. But I have used 2x4s, and I have also used pallet wood over at the scroll saw. And I know what people are going to say down in the comments. Anytime you use pallet wood or any other materials in today's video, always wear a dust mask, a dust respirator, especially more so than not when it comes to pallet wood, because you do not know what kind of chemicals they have been treated with as they have traveled from place to place in your area in the big wide world. So always just be as safe as you can be. But pallet wood can also scroll exceptionally well, and they are more so than not made out of pine. I found them made out of beautiful grained blue pine material, and I have used that in previous videos, and also I have stumbled upon them and they were made out of oak, but this is just a rustic pallet wood slat. If you guys know the model train and nostalgia room, I done 3 of the walls in a horseshoe appearance out of upcycled pallet wood, and people that come over always enjoy seeing that. Kind of has a rustic log cabin feel in there with all the nostalgia and model train stuff. But now I want to talk about compound cutting more so than I did earlier with that 2x4 piece. And this is a piece that I got at the local hardwood store. I've got a huge hardwood store. The hardwood store of North Carolina is around 15 or 20 minutes away from home, and they have a scrap bin of pieces that they cannot sell to the general public. You know, they sell the beautiful hard and exotic woods. They sell the purple hearts, the padukes, the zebra woods, you know, the cherries, you know, all kinds of exotic woods like that. But they also sell the dimensional lumber, and that is where this 2-inch piece of pine came from. It had a huge crack in it, and I just cut that off, and I've been milling it down. And for the past 4 or 5 compound cut videos, that is where the material has came from. I've just, again, continually milled it down as the patterns call for. But for compound cutting, you guys know I am commonly known for the compound cut keychains. Here is the 2 that I travel with when I do the live scroll saw woodworking demos. One says Artisan Pirate, my name, and then one says Myrtle Beach, the city that I like to go to and travel and vacation at. But these were made out of dimensional lumber, like the 2x4s, 2x6s, 4x4s, whatever I milled down to get the dimensions to make the keychain, and they call for 1-inch square material. And again, with these being soft woods, they are, and because they're made out of wood, obviously, they are obviously over time going to degrade and break apart. That's just the nature of it being a wooden keychain. But the material that I really, really love to use when it comes to compound cutting the keychains is poplar. Here's one ready to go. It is a 1-inch square strip, and poplar is a little bit more harder and denser than pine or cedar material, and it just scrolls exceptionally well. I love using poplar over at the scroll saw, but it is a little bit more expensive than, say, pine or cedar material. But obviously, once you cut the keychain out in the rough form, it is very square and blocky in appearance. So I'm happy to say that the poplar also sands, shapes, and contours well, because I like to go around and make the keychains comfortable to hold and give them as rounded as appearance as I can, again, just to make them comfortable to hold in the hand. But poplar is the material that is my go-to for custom compound cut keychains over at the scroll saw. But now we're going to get into some more of the exotic and hardwoods, and we're going to talk briefly about those, because I do not use them as much as I probably should for scroll saw woodworking projects. Anytime I get a material of nicer or hardwood out in the shop, I will keep it aside and hopefully make it into a gift for someone. You know, I'll keep it aside and save it and keep it in the back of my mind until time to use it comes forward with a beautiful project that I hope to give as a gift or something. But I have used a lot of cedar in the past. This is aromatic cedar here, and this is another piece that was picked up out of the scrap bin at the hardwood store. You can see that big crack going up the center, so they would not sell that to the general public. They have a huge quality control up there that is out of this world. They only sell to you guys the best of the best material that is offered from the species of woods. But I can still mill it down and get some pieces here, some pieces here. I can run it down and mill it and split it and get a 1/2 inch piece of cedar or a 1/4 inch piece, whatever the pattern calls for. It's just cedar is very brittle for me over at the scroll saw. I have cut out some delicate pieces out of 1/4 inch cedar before, and they have just broken away, and I had to fix them with some CA glue and activator after the fact. But it does cut exceptionally well, and it just has an added beauty when you add the clear coats or finishes at the end, because the grain really gets that dark red color. You could cut out a beautiful heart out of cedar and it would look phenomenal once the clear coats have been applied. Here is a material that I'm not as familiar with or versed with, but this is red oak, another piece from the scrap bin, and it was around 1 inch in thickness, and I ran it through the table saw to get it some 1/4 inch pieces. I got a scrap piece to try over at the laser because I was curious how the laser would react with that, and then this piece I used for a project that I'll show you momentarily, but it has some beautiful grains and textures, and you can see that split that's developing in it there, so I'll have to be very careful. But again, I can still get some usable pieces. A lot of people think you need big sheet goods, you know, to make scroll saw projects out of, but a lot of scroll saw projects do not take up a lot of material, so always keep that in mind when you are sorting through your scrap bin. You can break down bigger sheet goods and of course use them over at the scroll saw, but 9 times out of 10 a project does not take up much material over at the scroll saw. But here is the red oak material, and here is a project I cut out using that. This was 1 inch thick material, and this is a Leo the Lion zodiac puzzle. I cut out Leo the Lion because I am a Leo. I am a summer baby, so to speak. So here we have the beautiful lion here. It has the interlocking features of the puzzle, and this is a pattern from Fox Chapel Publishing from the Zodiac Pattern Puzzle book that we done in a previous video. But you can see how those grain textures really popped once the clear coat was applied. It was just because the material was a lot harder and denser than pine, cedar, or 1/4 inch material. I just had to take my time and let the blade do the work and be as loyal as I could be to the cut line. Your feed rate is going to change drastically depending on the materials you like to use over at the scroll saw. So I always try to reiterate, taking your time and letting the blade do the work. Here we have a piece of walnut, and I love scrolling out walnut over at the scroll saw. We have done a few projects with the walnut material. I love the smell of walnut, but it is a darker material, and obviously you do not have to add any kind of stains or paints to it because of the darkness. It has this very nice dark brown texture to it that is great for like an accent color in a lot of projects or for a backerboard or something like that. But I would not recommend using walnut to cut out maybe the keychains here. Of course, this is the proper dimensions where I could mill it down for keychains, but because of the darkness of the walnut once they finish is applied, it might be difficult to read the letters that you scroll out, and hopefully that makes sense. But I love using walnut over at the scroll saw. We made a previous Thanksgiving scroll saw project video with that was a Steve Good design out of walnut, and it finished up so beautifully, and it had some leaf designs in it, you know, some leaves for the fall of Thanksgiving. Just came out so beautiful. And it's a piece that we hang on the door every Thanksgiving season, so it's packed away with our stuff that hangs on the door as we rotate stuff out. But I like using walnut. And I want to talk about briefly these cedar fence pickets that I've started using. I picked these up at the local builder center where I get the same pine material here, and I should have talked about this when I held up the other cedar material, but I don't know what species of cedar this is, but it is very light, as you can see here. Again, the price for these is around $2.50. That's US currency. That is their regular price, but you can catch them on sale for around $1.50. Again, that is US currency. They are around 1/2 inch in thickness. They are very rough cut. You can run them through the thickness planer, or you can use them as is rough cut for a rustic aesthetic to your projects. They come in 6-foot lengths. This one here has already been cut up a little bit because most recently over here on the platform we made the little simplistic birdhouse designs out of the cedar fence pickets. But you guys know we've also done a couple scroll saw project videos with the cedar fence picket material, and it cuts exceptionally well over at the scroll saw. So that's an option there for a cheaper material that you might want to try over at the scroll saw. And I want to talk about oak. Now, oak is very hard and very dense. So if we listen to the cedar here, you can tell that is a very non-dense material, but if you hear the oak, you can tell that is harder and denser, so it is a much slower cut and a much slower feed rate over at the scroll saw. And oak, just like the red oak counterpart, is very brittle and it can break or chip away. And you can make the custom compound cut keychains out of this material. It's just a dreadfully slow cut, cutting out 1-inch thick material. But I have made projects in the past. I made this magical inspired magic wand with the compound cutting technique out of oak material, and you can see once again, once the clear coat was applied, that the grain textures really popped. So really cool. And speaking of the exotic woods, here is a way to combine a bunch of different exotic woods with this nativity scene that we made in a previous Christmas time YouTube video in previous years. This is a Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazine by Fox Chapel Publish and Design, but I just used a variety of materials I had on hand and milled them down to 1/4 inch in thickness. You have mahogany, you have walnut, you have basic pine, you have blue pine, you have ambrosia maple, you have other exotic woods in there. So really combining them, and then the clear coat really brought out the natural grains and colors and textures of everything. You didn't even need to add any additional types of paints or stains, and let the added beauty of the woods you use shine through and bring the beauty to the project itself. So really cool. Again, hopefully today's video inspires you guys to go out and try a newer material, maybe the 1/4 inch material I showed you, maybe a cedar fence picket, you know, maybe try some construction grade plywood. That is great for more simplistic designs, or if you wanted to really enlarge a scroll saw project and make a bit of yard art. But of course, with that method, you might have to go in with a jigsaw and cut everything out. I do have a jigsaw, and I have used it to cut out yard art in the past, but this video here was more or less catered to people who might be interested in scroll saw woodworking and didn't want to spend the money on expensive exotic or hardwoods to try the hobby out for themselves. Again, hopefully the video inspires you guys to think a little bit outside of the box, and hopefully it also helped some seasoned, as they like to say, scroll saw woodworking artists by hopefully inspiring them to try something new out in their garage or workshops. As always, I'm trying to keep the scroll saw a relevant tool going forward into the digital world that we live in now that CNCs and laser engravers are more and more affordable than ever for weekend or hobby woodworkers that are only able to get out in their garage or workshops a few hours each and every weekend. A scroll saw does not take up a large footprint out in a workshop, and it is a more so quote-unquote safer tool to teach with if you want to teach some little ones how to scroll saw, or if it's just a tool you want to pick up and use a few hours each and every weekend. But as always, I'm happy to answer any questions down in the comments below. If there is a material that you are very fond of, please let me know down in the comments below so we can interact together, and hopefully and maybe I can pick it up and try it for a featured video over here on the platform. But that's going to about wrap it up for today's video. I hope you guys picked up a tip, trick, or tidbit along the way, and if you're new to the channel, hopefully you'll click that subscribe button and also follow me across all my social media feeds under the Artisan Pirate name. As always, links to contact me as well as all my social media feeds will always be linked down in the description box, below these videos. That's about all for this one, and remember guys, if I can make it or do it, so can you guys. I'm the Artisan Pirate. Take care, and I'll see you guys real soon.